This is Pop Culture Yearbook. On this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Brad.
I am Pete.
And I'm Giff.
I was confused.
I just wanted to say, Brad, I was just going to say, you looked a little puzzled once we started recording.
Well,
it
changed the screen when I hit record. It was like a new update or something, and it looked different than it used to, and it caught me off guard.
It asked me for consent for you to record.
But it didn't ask Pete?
Evidently not. We don't need Pete's consent.
No. All right. I'm always good.
Well, we're all going now.
Yeah.
So we are in our third 1998. What a year 1998 was. My goodness, for movies and memories. We told you all about them, but we got movies coming up that we can't stop. So tonight's movie, actually, we'll probably get to it. It kind of has some connections to last week's movie. At least I said that and Pete agreed. So I think they'll. So last week we talked about The Truman Show, and tonight we're talking about Pleasantville. So actually, we're not doing any TV shows this month, but both of these movies deal with TV.
They certainly do.
Interesting, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I picked this movie I love it, but I picked it for another very, very specific reason, and I'll get to that in a second. But why don't one of you guys say, what do you remember about why? Well, actually, Pete, you have a similar memory, but who knows how much you remember?
Well, not much. I do remember going to see it with you, right? I don't even remember for sure that I did. Yeah, was it you and Kim?
Oh my God!
And me and Jenny. Is that was it?
It was a little more meaningful for me.
Okay, that's all I remember. That's really all I remember about it. But I remember seeing the movie kind of, but that's literally the only time I've ever seen it until now. But that's what I have to share. I'm just going to turn it right over.
You do remember who you were with, so that's something.
That's the most important thing.
I don't remember the first time I saw this movie. I do remember thinking it was very good. I really enjoyed it. I love the themes that it presents, the characters, the actors do an excellent job. We'll get into the cast here in a minute. And I actually just watched this movie maybe a month and a half ago.
That's right. You said that.
Before realizing that it was going to be Brad's pick for the month. So it was nice to go back and watch it this time, being so familiar with it. So writing my notes down and everything for prep tonight was a little easier. But yeah, great pick. Enjoyed the flick, and let's hear what Brad has to say about it.
Okay, so I picked this movie. I was thinking about it as I was watching it this time. I remember the time I went to it with Pete, but I think I actually saw it because it came out in October of 98. And the night that we saw it was like late February, early March. And it was at the Cinema Cafe. And so it had been out for a long time. I think I saw it once. I think I saw it once previously when it first came out and knew I liked it. And I'm sure I did because you guys probably know, and I've brought it up about the Fear episode. At this time, I had the biggest thing ever for Reese Witherspoon.
How big is it?
I still love her. But if she was in a movie...
Biggest thing ever.
If she was in a movie, I was going to watch it no matter what. I was obsessed with her, and I thought she was just the greatest. But this would be a night that combined this great love I had for her with a new love. So Pete,
little three-way action.
So I think I saw it once before, obviously, but then Pete, we went to it on our first date, me and Kim. So I met Kim.
Remember it being
at your birthday party at our apartment, and you invited her with Jenny, who she was friends with, and so you and Jenny were together. And secretly, you were apparently trying to kind of get us to notice each other. And that night, I did. And shortly thereafter, I called her and we started talking. And our first date was a double date to make it a little more comfortable because she knew Jenny and, she knew both of you, actually. And so we went to the Cinema Cafe where you could eat and watch movies, which they don't have many. There is still one of those around, I heard, but not the one we went to.
Yeah, I think there's
long gone.
There's one in New Hope still. There is. Last I heard, there was still one in New Hope.
So I had been smitten with Reese Witherspoon, but I was instantly smitten with Kim that night. And as she was friends with Jenny, it worked out so well that it was a much easier transition for me to try to talk to somebody because, that's not my thing. So thank you for going out with us And we went back to our apartment afterwards too. And we played that stupid "Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus" game. That they thought that was so dumb.
And we made like cheese and crackers and stuff like that.
Yeah, we had some things.
I didn't remember. I remember that night. I didn't remember that was the same night. I thought it was later that we had gone to see the movie. But,
so that was just about 25 years ago now since that night happened. We are still together. Been married for almost 23 years, and it's a tale as old as time. So obviously this movie has a very special place in my heart, but I hadn't seen it. Actually, Gifford, you just watched it. I hadn't seen it in many, many years. I had watched it a lot back at that time, like in the early 2000s. And I brought up last week how I'd love to watch like The Truman Show in class sometime and use it as a movie that you could like teach with high school kids. This is another like great movie for that. So when I was first starting teaching, I was like, I had watched it a few times and thinking about it, but it never really happened. But I remembered it having these great characters and actors, and I remember it having this, it's like it starts out kind of as a comedy and kind of light, but it becomes this very deep movie with some really important themes. It's not just a popcorn movie, and so I was excited to watch it again this time. So a couple other things. It did get 3 Oscar nominations for art, costumes, and the music. I mentioned the music last week for The Truman Show, and now this week, the score was nominated. And if you don't know this movie, we'll get to it, but it's one of those movies, well, I mean, it goes back a long, long time. Disney did it, but it's a movie where some things are in color and some aren't. But it's done in 1998 when that's like hasn't been done for a while. Like, and it's done better than probably ever that you've seen it. It's so cool. There's so many great visuals, and it's so much fun to watch. And then they take them back into the 50s, and so the costumes and all that. It's well earned for those Oscar nominations, I believe.
Well, you talk about the color. This was the first feature film that was recorded on film and then digitized. So it was all recorded.
So it was a new thing then.
Yep. It was recorded in color, digitized, and then they were able to remove the color from the shots. So it was a new technology for a feature film.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, and it was kind of like groundbreaking then in that way. It was, unfortunately, I learned looking this up, pretty much a box office flop, which just makes me angry.
I couldn't believe that.
It had a $60 million budget,
I was surprised
and it made only like 49 worldwide. Mm-hmm. It does have 86% critical positivity on Rotten Tomatoes, but only 79 by audience. So people are dumb, and usually people aren't lower than critics, but in this case they were. But I read, so this is quoting Rotten Tomatoes here. The little blurb about it under the positive critics rating says, it is filled with lighthearted humor, timely social commentary, which Pete brought up is still timely, and dazzling visuals. Pleasantville is an artful blend of subversive satire and well-executed Hollywood formula. And that's a pretty good description of the movie that I just figured I'd quote instead of try to rewrite. It is directed by Gary Ross. It was his first movie that he directed. He did write the movie Big, so he had done one of my favorite movies before in that way. And he went on to, what did I write down? He directed Seabiscuit, which was a big Oscar movie, Hunger Games, and Ocean's 8. So he hasn't directed a lot of movies, though. He went on from this, and he's only directed, I think, like 5 or 6, it looked like. So, but we'll come back maybe to his quote later. I have a quote from him about what this movie. No, I'll read it right now. He said, because we'll get to all these themes and we'll talk about like our thoughts on them. But he said this movie is about the fact that personal repression gives rise to larger political oppression. That when we're afraid of certain things in ourselves or we're afraid of change, we project those fears onto other things, and a lot of very ugly social situations can develop. And that is a very good summary of what this is about. So, actually, with that in mind,
that is good.
It is deep, and it's a deep movie. It's funny, and it's a comedy, a lot of it, but it also goes much beyond. It's much like The Truman Show, which we did a very good job on last week. So,
if you do say so yourself,
giving you a compliment too.
I agree. I think we knocked it out of the park.
So I'm going to read my synopsis, but did you want to add anything to those quotes there?
No, I think we'll kind of touch on all those.
Summarized it well.
Okay.
themes as we
So
cover
here,
the
if you
movie.
haven't seen Pleasantville, you just got a little idea of like what it's about. Here is the synopsis of the movie that I wrote, and then we will talk about it. So, hey, Pete, what do we love here at Pop Culture Yearbook?
Nostalgia.
That's right. And this is a movie that almost comes off like it should be nostalgic, but it's actually anti-nostalgia is what it is. So it kind of goes against our
True.
belief system here. So all is not as perfect as it seems in the fictional 50s town of Pleasantville. Pleasantville is a tale of two 90s teenagers who find themselves stuck in a 50s sitcom after fighting over remote control given to them by a mysterious repairman, Don Knotts. Even though David, who's also called Bud, because we get confused here. His name is David, but when he goes to Pleasantville, he becomes the character Bud. Even though he loves the show and knows everything about it, both he and his twin Jennifer, who will then be Mary Sue in the show, are in shock and want to leave immediately. But when Mary Sue finds out that the town hottie, Skip, likes her, she's momentarily appeased. Against the advice of Bud, she goes on a date with Skip, but when she realizes that he knows nothing about anything beyond holding hands, she teaches him a much naughtier lesson than holding hands. It is at this point things start to go astray. Skip tells the basketball team about his experience, and all of a sudden, a team that never missed a shot can't make anything and loses big time. Shortly thereafter, as teens are wont to do, everyone is now doing very R-rated acts in this G-rated town. While sex is the first step in disrupting the town, there is more to follow. Previously blank books are coming to life, color is appearing everywhere, because it's all in black and white, and fictional characters are becoming fully realized individuals. As the changes in town become more prominent, many are upset and start asking questions. Slow to accept what is happening, the mayor and others draft a new constitution to try to put an end to it. When Bud and the local malt shop owner, Mr. Johnson, defy the new rules and paint a giant mural, things come to a head. They are arrested and put on trial. During the trial, Bud makes a plea about seeing what's inside yourself. Going back to the quote by the director. After helping his dad see a new perspective, he changes color and most of the audience starts to follow until finally gets the mayor to show real anger and finish it off. Outside, everything is in beautiful color and Pleasantville is ready to start fresh. Surprisingly, Jennifer decides to stay and go to college as she has realized there is more to her than her 90s alter ego. David makes it back with a new understanding of his own and helps his mom through a difficult time. Pleasantville is an allegory, a statement on progress and morality, a comedy, a drama, and much more, but mostly it is about finding your true self and accepting the real you.
Excellent work.
Okay.
Just like this podcast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
This podcast is really about nostalgia and finding yourself within it. Anyway,
there's
go on.
so many details I could have included. I really tried to cut that down and just hit on the main plot of it, but it goes so much into specifics as it goes on. So let's start with the cast.
Yes.
So David/Bud is played by Tobey Maguire, and I feel like this is probably the perfect role that he's ever had. I like Tobey Maguire, but he is kind of like, I don't know, he's kind of nerdy. He's just kind of like this. He looks like he's not this big, strong, tough guy like a lot of actors. And he's just perfect for this role. He's a nerd who loves this old TV show, which as he's watching it on TV and this marathon's coming on and there's going to be a trivia contest where you can win money, all I'm thinking is, that's me watching the Brady Bunch right there. I mean,
I was thinking of you too. I'm like, this would be Brad watching the Brady Bunch. It was exactly my thought as I was watching.
But he has to grow up. He has to start to act
even
a little
Peter.
tougher when he's given a chance to. And I just think he's so perfect for this role, and I just love him.
Yeah, I wrote the same note in mine. He plays the perfect nerd, and I think about like when he was cast as Spider-Man in 2003.
Yeah.
Like I thought he was the perfect Peter Parker. Like I
liked him there too.
He's a nerd, and then he can turn into Spider-Man. But I thought he plays a perfect Parker and does a great job here as well.
Also perfectly cast is my first love, Reese Witherspoon, who is his sister, who they are twins, but they are complete opposites. Whereas he's a big nerd that wants to watch this show, she is trying to set up a date when her parents are out of town, when her mom is out of town, so that she can do who knows what with this guy that she's invited over.
Oh, we know what.
And she plays the role of that very well. She can play everything from the very naive and innocent, all and up to like in fear at certain times, and now in this movie. And in other movies she's done, she can definitely go to the other end of the spectrum as well. She's very varied in that.
Yeah.
But so she's throwing in a fish out of water here. When she gets taken to this town, I mean, she absolutely doesn't want to be there, and she is completely opposite of everything that anybody is like there. So that's the interesting part, is to see her character arc change, because of course she's maybe affected more than anybody. Almost.
Well, and you see her character arc, but also Bud, or David. He is the one who really affects change in Pleasantville and looks to make things more realistic and have people express themselves.
Eventually.
Right, eventually.
Not at all at first.
But he comes around. He is the one who makes that change really happen, especially with the kids, telling them, the stories in the books that make the books fill in, and, telling them that they should, be listening to the music and looking at art with Mr. Johnson at, like he's the one who, and tells Mr. Johnson, you don't need to do the same things all the time in the same order. Like just, so it's interesting to see how in the end, she's the one who actually stays, and he's the one that, is ready to go back. I would have thought he would want to stay because everything's going well for him there.
Pete?
I want to make a point here and draw a parallel to last week's episode, because we talked about the character names. Now, I was watching this with my son the other day, and it was great because he usually doesn't watch these kind of movies, but he actually he really loved it. But what he also said, and I had not heard this, but it's a point he brought up. I wanted to see if you guys had heard this before, that Mary Sue is sort of like a Karen. It's like calling someone a Karen, and it's a term for somebody that thinks they're better than everybody else. I had not heard that, but I thought that was interesting that he pointed that out right away. So he's like, that's what people call each other. I don't know.
I didn't know that. I just thought that was a common name in an old 50s sitcom type of thing.
Right.
Bud and Mary Sue.
Yeah. Maybe I don't know, but it's a point that he brought up, and I didn't look it up or anything, but I thought I would bring that up since we talked about that a lot last week with the character naming.
Okay. Their mother in the show. So this is when they get to Pleasantville. This is where most of the actors are. Most of the action takes place there. Is Joan Allen, who had a pretty big run there in the 90s. I remember her mostly from this movie and Face Off, but she was in a lot of things. I think she was even nominated maybe for an Oscar once. I didn't look it up. I don't remember.
I remember her also from the Bourne Identity or Bourne trilogy.
Oh, she was in those two?
Yep.
I don't know. We would just watch that, and I don't remember that one. Another guy who was pretty
was huge. Was the Oscar for Face Off, by the way?
No. Another guy who was pretty huge at this time, coming off. So we talked about Fargo not long ago, and the movie Fargo came out 2 years before this. William H. Macy is the father on Pleasantville of Bud and Mary Sue, and he's always great, and he was riding high at this time. We have Jeff Daniels, who is Mr. Johnson, and I had actually forgotten he was in this. He plays such a reserved background role almost in this movie. It's a big character, but compared to Dumb and Dumber, but even some of the other movies he did that were bigger, he really is kind of a supporting character here who does not steal scenes, and he just is there, and he's important, but he doesn't command anything away from anybody else.
Right.
Plays it perfectly. Does exactly what he has to do.
We got a couple of young people from Pleasantville who were really big. So Paul Walker, R.I.P. Yep. This is one of his first movies, I think, and he's the town guy that Mary Sue immediately is intrigued by. He's great because he plays such a, he's the Pleasantville guy, so he's just smiling all the time. He's happy. He has no idea what's going on.
Shucks, jock. Yep,
there you go.
Corn fed,
all American.
Bread.
That's what he is.
Yeah.
Marley Shelton is one of the main girls from the town, and she was in a lot of movies, especially at this time. She's gone on to a lot of different things, but I remember her mostly from the movie Sugar and Spice.
Wasn't she in The Sandlot? Wasn't she the
yes,
lifeguard?
She is in The Sandlot. That is correct.
Yeah. Yep.
The mom The real life mom of David and Jennifer is Jane Kasmerick. This is just before Malcolm in the Middle came out. She goes on to play the role there. And then the other person I wanted to mention is J.T. Walsh, who is the mayor, and he was a great actor. He was in a movie I loved a year earlier, Breakdown, where he's the bad guy, where Kurt Russell and his wife get stranded on the side of the road out in the desert.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's so good there. And I knew he had died, but I didn't realize he died in February of 98.
Yeah.
Like 10 months before this movie ever came out. And this was his, one of the last movies he was in. And dedicated to him. And so seeing him on the screen, having been, gone for quite a while, that was pretty interesting. And it's a big role, and he has a great part in this movie as well.
I always think of him from A Few Good Men. I believe he's the Markinson character in A Few Good Men.
He's in that too.
Yeah.
All right, so anybody else that you want to mention?
You did mention Don Knotts. This was his last on-screen role.
Yeah, he switched to like voice acting, right?
That's correct.
He probably did. So, and that was nice to see him because he plays like this role in between the two worlds. But Don Knotts, you think of him as being an old-time like TV guy and different stuff. Obviously Andy Griffith, and so to see him on here was really fitting. And he's an interesting character. I had some things to say about him later too. Where I didn't really think about it until this time, that there might be a lot more going on with him than I first thought. All right. So anyway, it does start in the present in the 90s. And they, David and Jennifer are like fighting over the remote. And then Don Knotts shows up and gives them this weird fancy remote. And that's how they end up in there, because he feels like that David has proven that he belongs. Like, he's been looking for somebody to bring into this TV show, into this town, and David is the guy that he picked.
See, and I have questions on this too. Like,
yeah,
why would he want to mess
pretty fast?
Well, but why would he want to mess with his favorite TV show by introducing a new person there? Like, obviously, as the show goes on, he's pretty upset with David because of all the things that David helps to change in the show.
Is he though?
Yes, Pete, go.
Or is it that he's trying to teach him that's part of the lesson, and he's like challenging him, and he's acting like he's upset with him, but he's really not. He's like kind of playing him along.
Because at the end, he's sitting there in the van still, and he smiles and he looks pleased with it. So that's when I realized, wait a minute, I think I'm with Pete here for once, that he's a character who was there. He looked one way, but he was all about getting David to change. That's what this movie is really about. And he brought out this other side of David, and he affected the town and eventually in a positive way. So I think it's all an act. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay. I already said this reminded me of me watching the Brady Bunch. So we're in the early part of the movie here. I do have some quotes. I don't know what else you guys want to say. When they first get to, so all the good quotes really go to Reese.
Yeah.
When they get to Pleasantville, and David says something, and she goes, "We're supposed to be at home, bud. We're supposed to be in color," which is because they're in black and white now. So, and the way she delivers that is very good. The part where because the basketball team, this kind of famous scene, they can never miss. They make every single shot. Although I have a question about this too. After he has sex, they start missing shots, and the ball's bouncing away, and the coach or somebody goes, "Don't touch it."
Right.
Yes. Stay away from it. Yep.
One of the lines I like from Reese's character is, of course, she's throwing her fit on the way to the first day of school, and then Paul Walker's character pulls up and says, "Hey, what's going on, Mary Sue?" And of course, he is absolutely gorgeous. So that catches her attention. And so she turns right away like, "Oh, this isn't such a bad place." And I think she said something to David like, "Does he like me?" And he goes something like, "Yes." Like, he was so disappointed that this character is going to now like his sister, who is, not worthy of his attention or this place.
He knows what's going to happen and where it's going.
Right. Yeah. Right. So here's a question. Here's a question I have.
She's going to be interested now.
Right. Here's a question I have. So you have this basketball team.
I wonder if this is the same question I have.
You have this basketball team that's never lost a game. right? Because they never miss a
Why don't you
basket.
just ask it?
You're going the right direction here.
So, in geography class,
Yes.
in geography class, they're talking about the town of Pleasantville and how Elm Street is different from Main Street. And Mary Sue, right, asked what's outside of Pleasantville, and everybody cannot understand what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's nothing
who are they
outside,
playing in these games?
who are they playing? Who are they beating over
Right.
and over and over
Right.
again?
And
So-
when they did lose, who did
I think
they
it's
lose
like the
to?
Washington Generals.
Right. So
It's
is
like the
this-
Globetrotters playing against the Washington Generals. It's the same stationary team.
And they just keep them. They just keep
Probably
them on in a pole barn, just on the edge of town, and pull them out all the time and play them. So I was wondering that one. The
so
other
happy
thing,
you brought that up because that's exactly what I was thinking.
the other thing I was wondering, and this goes to the Brady Bunch more so to I think to maybe the movies, but when they're in the soda shop and she goes to the bathroom to get away from people, there's no toilet.
Yes, this is another one. So once they all start changing and all this stuff, don't they have to go to the bathroom at some point?
So not only that, so if Paul Walker
They're not real. They're not
is
real.
anatomically able to have sex,
Right, but they change and they're having sex and they're doing all these things. So
right. But if you're able to if you have the equipment available to have sex, don't you also have the equipment available if you're gonna go to the soda shop and eat burgers and drink cherry Cokes? Don't you have to go to the bathroom?
it seems weird that all these things they can do and would end up doing in color later when they all change, but yet they don't ever have to go to the bathroom. That doesn't make sense. So
and here's another one. So we have the scene where Mary Sue basically gives the birds and the bees talk to her mother, and the mom is completely flabbergasted. She has no idea what sex is. How are there children in this town?
Well, I think the town. Okay, that one. I think the town just started when the show started. They all started at the age that they are basically currently at.
That's the thing.
So
I
did have the same question when I watched it, but I think that's a pretty easy answer to that one that you can justify.
Okay,
the town didn't exist before the show. It is the show.
There is always a possibility that we're overthinking it here.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Hey, I have the exact same questions as Gifford, so I think we're right on.
The big one was,
I actually did
playing?
too.
Who does this team
Who are they
playing? Right. So
that
was a big one.
Of course, Mary Sue never reads, and somehow she ended up with a book, and Bud said, "What were you doing in the library?" And she goes, "I got lost." But my favorite line of her, well, no, she's got so many more. But Bud is saying that she does actually have to go on this date because they have to do things the way the show goes and they have to keep it normal. And I love how she goes, "Do you think anyone is going to notice if I don't have a chocolate malt with this guy?" Because that's all they do. They go have a malt and they go hold hands, maybe.
Have a cheeseburger. And that was the other thing I loved is the breakfast
There
scene.
is a lover's lane, and that's all they do.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the other thing too. Like, so you can't. Sex is obviously out of the question. But of course, when the dad comes home and, "Honey, I'm home," and the first thing his wife has for him is a martini. So obviously, drinking's okay, right? Because that's
in moderation. Only in 50s show terms, and probably only for men. Good point.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
After they have their date, or when was it? But Bud says, because she's supposed to get something from him. Her pin, the pin. He's supposed to pin her. That was the big move. And the girl said, "Did he give it to you?" And she goes, "I don't think he knows how."
Right. Or when she goes, "Well, I could just pin you," and of course he's like, "Oh, Mary Sue, how are you going to do that?" And then she just goes right after him.
And the other thing I love about how they all just start having sex in these cars, and of course you don't see anything other than their legs, but they're three cars like lined up in a row, and everybody's doing it like right next to each other. Right. They have no like
in convertibles.
Yeah,
right.
That this is weird.
Top
Why
down.
do it?
Right. Yeah. Here's one thing I picked up for the first time watching this just a couple days ago. So we have Bud and Mary Sue's mom. Character's name is Betty.
Yeah.
Okay. My mom
is
Betty. Mr. Johnson, who is sweet on Betty, his first name is
Bill.
Your
dad.
So Bill and Betty are kind of sweet on each other. So I thought that was kind of cute just for my own personal viewing there.
But
right.
Mary Sue's not happy because nobody is happy in a poodle skirt and a sweater set.
Well, that's the other thing too. Like, why are you wearing a sweater? It's 72 degrees all
Because
the time.
that's what they wear.
They'd be hot. They'd be so hot all the time.
No. But so this movie is not all about sex, but that's like the first thing that like starts things in motion because it's what Mary Sue does. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden you start to see certain things turn in color and certain people, and it's interesting to see who changes color and who doesn't. And so you brought up like David, who he's key. He stays black and white longer than almost anybody, even though he is doing all these things eventually. At first he's not. At first he's all about keeping things the same, and that's why he doesn't change. But Mary Sue does not change color after having sex because she's obviously done that many times before. Nope. But a lot of the kids do. However, did you notice what's his face? Skip did not.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting.
Well, but here's another question I have for you. What is the impetus for you to change color or for you to see color? Because Skip saw color. He saw that red rose the night that after he dropped off Mary Sue after they had their date. So he's able to start...
Everybody sees it, though.
But
all the black and white guys see it. That's why they hate it. That's why they're against it.
But he's the one who notices it first. It's the first time that you see color in the show.
That's the first time there is color, and he happens to be standing there.
Okay, so you're saying... So what makes a tree change color then?
It's the general feeling of things are changing around here.
Okay. All right.
I mean, that's why other than the people, why does anything change
once the
color?
Tree...
What's that, Pete?
I took away from it that the tree must have, gotten it on with another tree.
Oh boy.
There you go. All right. Fair enough.
There's another... Oh, yeah, no, forget that. So anyway, you brought up the mom, and that's kind of an interesting scene. She teaches her how to, because she said that the father would never do that after she teaches her. So she teaches her to do it herself in the tub, and she enjoys it so much it starts a fire outside. And so there you go. Why did the tree go on fire? Because somebody was changing and having such a revelation that it spread to other things.
Sure,
that's right there.
That's a pretty big reaction to.
Well, she had a pretty good time there.
Her having her first. Here's the most unbelievable part of this entire movie, is it's so many of the men who are against having sex.
Yeah, well, because these are men who are only for that traditional, and they don't want the double beds either that show.
Oh, that just kills me. Right? Everybody sleeps in a single bed. Yeah.
But they don't know what it is anyway, so they don't have that. Right. But it is funny to think that, the men wouldn't, and the women are probably more into it. Yeah. But the fire department shows up to put out the fire, but they have no idea what to do because the only job they've ever had is to get cats out of trees.
Correct.
So Bud teaches them how to use the hose and what it does.
This is funny because he's like yelling.
Yeah, he's yelling fire as he gets to the fire station.
He's yelling fire, fire, fire. And then he yells, and no reaction. And then he yells, "Cat!" And they all run out into their trucks.
But this even yell. He doesn't even yell, "Cat!" He just goes, "Cat!" And then they all spring to action.
This is another place where I first thought about the connection to the Truman Show. All these people that have these jobs have never learned how to actually do these jobs, just like on the Truman Show. Right. That was where I kind of made that connection there.
I like that.
Oh yeah.
So Margaret takes cookies to Bud, and he does not want to accept them because he knows from the episode that they are for Whitey. And she insists and this is Margaret is a Marley Shelton. She finally gets him to take them because she will not take no for an answer. And that's where Bud probably starts to first kind of make his change and start to see things. And eventually he'll see how things are going, and he knows that, he's got to do what's right. But that's like the first time where he broke the rules. She didn't give him much of a choice, but
right. Yeah, because he's at that point still trying to press on with the episodes that are and how they're supposed to happen. So those are the cookies for Whitey. If she doesn't give him the cookies, then he won't ask her to the dance or whatever. And it's just gonna mess everything up.
Okay, so now this is when things start to turn to color and other stuff happens. So Why don't one of you say what you have for some notes next here?
So this is kind of a interesting. One of the things that I found is interesting, and so we have Betty who turns color, and so we've got the mayor.
Oh, that's a really good scene too. So I don't know if you're gonna, but she's crying in the kitchen because her husband is asking for something, and she won't go out there because she's afraid for him to see her in color. And Bud takes out the makeup and like makes her black and white again, and that's really cool scene and how he connects with her.
That's a white face. They went ahead and did a white face instead of a black face there. We've got the mayor is over and he's starting this committee. This is where you start to see maybe a little fascist regime come in. They get a little more heavy-handed in their messaging here. Mm-hmm. But, he wants George to, come and be part of the Chamber of Commerce because, we want to stand up for what's right. They keeps using all these terms as far as how they're going to keep things on track in their town in a traditional sense, and it's their way is the proper way. And of course, we have Betty is in the kitchen, I'm sure hearing all of this, and she's just mortified. And the thing that gets me here is that George just keeps yelling for her from the living room. He doesn't actually get up to see how she's doing.
It had to take a while too, because to do all that makeup had to take and he just keeps asking for her name and doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's
right. But again,
go ahead.
These people don't know what to do. Like, he is a fictional character. Mm-hmm. So when he calls her name, she's supposed to come because that's what happens in the show. And so when she doesn't, it's not like he senses a problem. He doesn't know what's going on. He just keeps that's where the interesting fiction versus reality is. Before these people actually become like real humans, they are just characters who don't know. They're robots. Yeah.
So you have a scene later after Betty has left and George isn't aware of it, and he comes home, the lights are off.
Where's my dinner?
And that's all he keeps repeating is, where's my dinner? He's not, where's my wife? Mm-hmm. He's not concerned about where his wife is. He's concerned about where his dinner is.
Because when he walks in, he's supposed to sit down and she gives it to him. That's what that's what the life is. That's all he knows.
Right.
So that's where things start to get weird, and some of the guys that are in black and white start to have questions. I love the song "At Last" by Etta James in this movie. It's in the scene where they're at Lover's Lane, and it is so great. It's just one of those great musical moments. I wanted to throw that in there because that's one of the best songs I think probably ever.
Well, and the imagery of them, driving down the road and
the imagery,
blossoms, are falling off the trees. The pink blossoms,
it's all color.
It's just so
because
beautiful.
Lover's Lane is completely color by now. I mean, everything is. That's not an area where there's any black and white left, like some of the parts of the town.
Correct. Yeah, and that's such a sweet scene because it's Lover's Lane, of course, where all of the sex has been going on, but it's just kids hanging out, reading to each other. Some kids are still black and white.
Yeah, they're laying down. They're just
some are in color.
Most of them are in color,
experiencing each other and books and new things.
They're not robots anymore, and they're doing what they truly have learned they want to do, which is, be a kid and do whatever, which sometimes that's having sex and sometimes it's reading a book, and it's all kinds of different stuff.
Right. Well, and I wanted to go back to one thing where the kids first learn about the books filling in, and the old guys are sitting out at the barbershop watching across the street as these kids are lined up outside the public library. And they're, coming out with all these books, and so many kids are in color, some are not. And one of the guys goes, going up to that lake is one thing, but now they're going to a library.
Yeah, they're really against the library. They're kind of like
sex is okay. Sex is okay, but expanding your mind,
right,
is dangerous. That's where the real danger comes in, because now we can't control.
That's true.
We can't control these kids and what they know.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
But the library is kind of
direct correlation to what we're seeing today.
The Pawnee Library, the enemy of the people. Right. This is also around the same time where
I want to bring up, because there's
go.
So I was just going to say, I want to bring up that this is where we're starting to see the fascism come into play, and where the mayor is giving a big speech. And what is the logo that's behind him? Did you catch that?
I don't remember.
That's two hands.
A handshake.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's they're shaking hands, which is a sign of peace. And I think that's a callback to the swastika. That pattern of the swastika originally was a sign of friendship and peace.
It was.
And so
yes.
I felt like that was sort of the tie-in that they were going for there, where because that was becoming their symbol as they were starting to become more and more fascist.
Well, and you see that they asked all true citizens to come to this meeting, and of course, you're only a true citizen if you're still black and white. You know, we have signs in businesses, no coloreds allowed. So, I mean, this is, they had the book
the second
burning
thing
at the library.
The second thing on the new Constitution is that all people will be pleasant to each other, which they think, so they're not going to do anything bad to the people in color. But what it does, the colored people realize as they read on, is that they have no individuality anymore to do anything they want to do. So, because when they first read that, the girl's like, yeah, that's pretty good. We'll all be pleasant to each other. But it goes on and and you get the fine print.
Right. They're gonna teach the non-changeist view of history.
And this is also,
and there's restrictions on music. There's restrictions on color. There's restrictions on bed size. I mean, it's so restrictive.
There's also a point here where we should bring up that Don Knotts does show. So they beg him to let him out, and this is another sign, I think, that he is testing Bud, because he didn't let him out right away. He makes him stay there. But now he acts like he's all mad that everything's changing, but this is where we see Bud changing again. He just shuts him off. Mm-hmm. He turns the TV off and doesn't even listen when Don Knotts says, "You got to go. We got to get out of here. You're ruining everything." Right. So that's the big sign of that's where, and you'd think that's maybe where Bud should turn into color, but he still doesn't at that point. So
one of the other interesting,
everybody has their own
things,
individual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other interesting things to me in this movie is how Bud and Mary Sue speak to the people that are supposed to be their parents. Obviously, they're not. But like I mentioned, Mary Sue's the one who has the birds and the bees talk with her mom and teaches her that. When we have before the trial and Bud is in his jail cell and George shows up to talk to him, Bud speaks to him more as a equal or even
they're the parents.
Right.
The kids are the parents.
They definitely are. It's just an interesting dynamic of how these two kind of are, above everybody else in this town.
That's because they don't understand real life, and these two do, so they have to teach them, even though they're their parents, in quotes, they have to teach them what a person actually is, and so it's their job. They do also, though, even though they want to separate everything pleasant from unpleasant. So you get into a very obvious racism theme here. And I did read one review that hated the movie and said that all this stuff about coloreds is stupid because there aren't any people of color in the movie.
There aren't. Not one person.
But would there ever be a person of color on a sitcom like this in the 50s?
No.
There wouldn't be.
Right.
So it's like, you get in the context, it makes sense.
Right.
It can still make the point. It's a metaphor for a bigger problem that we all experience. And I think we're big enough to put those together, even if all the people in it are white. We can understand the context. So that stuff just bugs me.
And it's exactly what that's the point of it, though. The point of it is that they're attempting to draw a parallel of what happens if there is racism within white people. White on white racism.
Well, they're turning on each other, right?
And that's what eventually happens. Right, exactly.
So the other thing, one of the reviews I read was talking about how, you have these kids from the 90s that are thrust into this, picture perfect 50s world. And of course, they corrupt everything. But
But it's
the
not
50s
perfect. That's the whole point.
But the 50s weren't perfect. Like you had, racial issues. The music that they're playing in the diner is from the time.
That's the point of the movie,
right.
is that this perfect perception of the good old days, make America great again. It wasn't perfect. It was horrible. There were horrible things happening, maybe even worse than there are now. And that's what they enlightened them to.
Right. So I think people who looked at this movie and said, well, of course, this is what happens if you take, the fast times of the 90s and put them in the 50s. No, the 50s were turbulent.
Yeah, and kids had sex in the 50s too.
Right. Well, and that was another thing that kind of gave me a chuckle a little bit when they're having the trial at the end, and they're obviously part of America, because one of the songs that was deemed appropriate was the Star Spangled Banner. Mm-hmm. But when Bud asked, "Where's my lawyer?" the mayor says, "Well, we don't need to make this ugly." So the music of America is there, but not the laws necessarily. So it's
they've got their own society.
Right. Yeah. So they, take what they want and leave the rest behind.
So the big thing too that we should really mention that gets everything going is, so Mr. Johnson turns out is a great artist and he loves art. And Bud brings him a book with art in color from the library, and he learns about it. And he's always painted this mural, of course, in black and white, but he paints one in color. And then he changes it to basically a nude picture of Betty, which riles everybody up. And all these people are throwing rocks through it, and they loot and destroy his store, which, again, it's just like today. And that's what sets it off. But Bud and him then make the mural on the brick wall that can't be ruined. And when they're told, this is after the new Constitution comes out. And so they go as far as they can. And this is where it leads to things getting could get violent. And you start to see some of these boys from the high school, like Whitey. Turns out they're not as nice as we thought they were. They're threatening Betty, the mom, in an ugly way. And that's where Bud has to stand up for her. And that's finally where he does turn into a fully color person.
Sure. I will say that painting a nude picture of another man's wife on the window of your diner, that's a bold move.
Yeah,
that is a bold move.
When there's already tension brewing within the city.
I don't know. I mean, I'm all for self-expression and the people of this town becoming fully realized, but I don't know if I go so far as to say I'm all right with that.
I'm going to throw out too. If you brought up the bathroom situation, like I thought of too. Why did they have a tub?
Oh, good point.
Why did she even have a tub to go pleasure herself in when they shouldn't need to do that either? If they don't need to go to the bathroom, if they don't have any facilities like that. So,
well, that's not the washing tub. That's the masturbating tub. So,
Jesus. Skip. So going back to Skip again, he is still black and white, even though he was the first person to have sex in the town. But he's kind of turned into a jerk too. And what we realize, well, I think anyway, is that he learned that he liked to have sex, but he didn't really change. He didn't learn anything about himself, and he didn't embrace this newness around him like most of the other kids did. Like when all the kids were at Lover's Lane in that beautiful scene, he wouldn't be there for that because he didn't change like they did.
Well, maybe, he's repressed in a way that he enjoys it, but doesn't want anybody else to see that's something that he's given.
He told all the basketball team though.
Well, yeah, but he's not going to tell the parents. He's not going to, I just think it's, he still wants to have that straight and narrow image.
So the whole courtroom scene, I thought that reminded me of To Kill a Mockingbird. You had all the colored people in the upper rows, and you had all the black and white people in the bottom, and just a big courtroom scene back, which that was earlier than the 50s, but just that whole thing in the past. But Bud gives his big speech, and he gets through to his dad, who, this is all kind of weird, though, because clearly she's going to end up with Mr. Johnson and likes him, but he still gets the dad to admit his love for Betty and how beautiful she is, and that's what gets him to finally change color, which then spreads to other people, and then finally he gets the mayor to do it by showing his anger and letting out his true insides as well.
Yep. Hey, one thing I was going to mention, we talked about how the basketball team never misses a basket. Did you happen to notice the scores while in the bowling alley?
No.
The mayor, Big Bob, is bowling the 300. He has all strikes. And everybody else, there's no open frames.
Well, I was going to say, they don't always get strikes because there's that scene where they had like 7-10 splits in a row and everybody picked them up. I'm like, why would you get a 7-10 split to start with in this place?
Well, that's the other thing too. Like, if everything's pleasant and everything works out for everybody, if you go bowling, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. Same thing with like when they're playing bridge. It's like, well, doesn't somebody have to lose if you're playing something like that? I don't know. It's kind of weird.
So, and we already brought up the end, but Mary Sue, Jennifer, decides to stay there because apparently she's been accepted into a college because she says, I'll never be accepted into college at home. So she's going to try out this new life, which I guess that's interesting that she can just stay there. But David goes home. His mom is crying. He cheers her up. That's where his place is to be there. But then, as Pete said, you also see Don Knotts at the end, and he smiles. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there's either two different versions of him, or it's the whole thing was just a setup, just to basically get through to David, or
it was a setup
because Don Knotts felt he had to save this town, I guess.
Sure. Here's my question: the real mom isn't going to miss that her daughter is gone?
Well, yeah, there's going to be a little explaining to do there, isn't there?
I was wondering that too, yeah.
And here's the other thing. So before David gets sent back to his time, Betty is there, and she gives him, the jacket, the Letterman jacket, and the food to eat on his trip. And that's just such a sweet scene because it's almost like she is more of the mom in that situation. So is she just there to send him off and then she's gone again? Because you see the very last scene is
no way to know.
Is George is on a park bench and sitting next to Betty, and they're talking about what's going to happen next. And George is like, I don't know. And he starts laughing, and he looks over at Betty, and the camera just goes to her. And then she looks back the same way. And instead of George, now it's Bill sitting there.
That's right. That's kind of cool, too.
So
I don't know what it means, but it's kind of cool.
Right. So
you got to use some thinking.
My big questions are, does the mom care that her daughter has vanished and we'll never see her again? And what happens with Bill and Betty and George?
Well, I guess the other question, too, though, is when you're in Pleasantville, does time pass when she eventually comes back? Like, will she come back to that moment? I don't know.
Well, and that's a good point, because the whole time David was gone, it was only 1 hour.
Yeah, it was a short time.
Yeah, because when he comes back, the TV says, well, that's the first hour of our Pleasantville marathon. So that whole time he was in Pleasantville was only one hour in his time.
But so we also mentioned this movie was up for an Oscar for score, and there was that scene where they're doing one of the murals, and it's so powerful, and the music is just wonderful. But then this movie ends with, it's Fiona Apple, but it's Across Universe by the Beatles, and that is my favorite Beatles song, and her version is great. And it's great because it fits, the two different time periods, the cover of it, and somebody who was big, and it's such a great ending and such a great song to finish it off.
Right.
I loved it.
I completely agree.
I did too. I mean, I have a few questions, but in a time travel type of movie, you're always going to have questions.
My biggest disappointment was learning that this didn't make back its budget. It's criminal that this movie wasn't bigger than it is.
I think, though, like with the audience score being lower than the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, I think the thing is, this movie, it has so much in it that I think that turns off your mainstream audience. They don't know what it is. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it a racial movie? There's so many themes in it that while that works for me and I think it's great, I think your everyday audience is just not necessarily drawn to that. It's too much for them.
Mm-hmm. And that could very well be.
Which is too bad. Okay, so I mentioned time travel. We're going to draft tonight the best time travel, mostly movies, but Pete asked about TV, and so you could throw TV shows in here too. The best time travel movies and TV shows that we personally like.
Yes.
I'm going to go first, followed
our
by
order
Pete
tonight.
and
Yep.
Gabe.
Awesome.
I have my list here, but I hadn't even really thought about the fact that I'd be first and figured out what I was going to pick. But I guess the obvious answer I'll pick is Back to the Future.
Oh, no, really?
Well, I mean, I could have picked Pleasant. I got like 3 or 4 good ones. I hadn't really thought, though. Having the first pick, what should I pick? But yeah,
you have to pick that.
And it's Back to the Future Part 1,
by
the way. You are free to pick second and third one in this draft. We are not doing a once one is gone, they're all gone. So
right.
I have picked the first one.
Of course, I could pick that, but I'm not going to, at least not yet, because I don't want to repeat. My first pick is going to be Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Nice.
So here's the deal. I wrote that down as number 2, and when I saw it in the list, I'm like, yeah, that's great. But then I started thinking, is there actually any time travel?
Well, in your description on the drive, you said time jump. You have time jump. So there's a time jump in that.
Okay, but see, I wasn't maybe going to pick it because I figured one of you would probably correct me on it that, well, there's no time travel in there.
No, I've got it. I've got it on my list.
No. If people are frozen in time, that's the mold.
There's a big time jump.
Not in the first one. Not in the first one, but isn't it in the second one or something? They actually go back in time to the
second
60s?
And third, because you've got
third,
you've got Rob Lowe as the young number 2, which was a perfect casting.
Good, and I have no problem with you picking it. I
don't either.
Okay, and I love it. We're gonna do that movie someday. It's love it so much.
I feel fortunate as the third selection here to get this movie. Again, I'm not going to argue with either one of your picks because they are awesome. I'm going to go Groundhog Day.
Yep. That's a good one.
I thought for sure Pete was going Groundhog Day.
He travels back in time every morning.
Nope.
All right, I'm going to go. See, now I'm kind of stuck between, no, I'm going to take Pleasantville.
All right. I didn't even write it down because I figured you were just going to grab that one.
I do love this movie. I don't know why I was thinking about... I mean, I got a few others I love, but this was the original.
This one's high on the list, for sure.
Pete?
All right. I am going to go, just because this is a rare case where I like the sequel better than the original, but they both work. But I'm taking Terminator 2.
I don't think Gifford liked that one.
Damn it, Pete! You stole it from me.
Both are great. You can take the first one based on the rules that we made up for Back to the Future.
No, I know I can take the first one, but T2 is the better version. All right, I'm gonna take The Edge of Tomorrow. I'm gonna take the action version of Groundhog Day.
Mm-hmm. Excellent movie.
All right.
Now, Brad, are you going to take what I think you're going to take here?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I'm going to save it because I don't think you guys are going to pick it. Maybe you will. I don't know. I'm going to pick Lost.
One
of my favorite TV shows ever. And even though I don't necessarily love the time travel aspect of it, it's still such a great show that it's way high on my list.
Good deal.
I am going to go with one of my favorite TV shows, definitely like around the middle school time frame, I would say, Quantum Leap. I used to love that show.
Leap.
Gifford, I don't think Brad ever watched it.
I have never seen that show.
But Gifford, did you watch that show?
Bits and pieces.
Oh, it was on NBC.
Yeah, but I've seen like parts.
It was on NBC.
All right.
But it was good, and there's a lot of people that watched it, and I loved it. The new one, I can't get into it. They have a new one, but can't get into it.
All right. I'm going to take X-Men Days of Future Past. I enjoyed them bringing the new class, the first class, in with the originals. Cover a lot of ground in there, so that's where I'm going.
All right, now at number 4, I'm going to pick a movie that came out about 10 years ago that, again, my wife and I went to see together, and we were just at the end like, wow, that was so good. And that is the movie About Time.
That
Starring
was
Rachel McAdams and Domhnall Gleeson, and I can't think of his name now, but the guy that plays Bill Nighy from Love Actually. And you think it's a romantic comedy, and that's why we went. And then you go and you realize, no, that's just one part of it. This is much more than that. It's about fathers and sons and time travel. It's fantastic.
Yes, you turned me on to this one. You said I've got to watch it. I watched it, and I was not disappointed at all.
Actually, Margot Robbie's in it too. One of her first roles. She's the friend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's not a huge part, but she's in it too.
Great movie. Please, anybody who has not seen that movie, I'm assuming a lot of our listeners have seen the movies that we've talked about thus far and the shows, but please watch About Time. It's excellent.
Did we lose Pete?
All right.
On.
I'm picking one that I'm here. I'm a little bit surprised this one's still on the board because after Back to the Future, this is more of an obvious pick, I think. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yep. Good, solid pick.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Pete picked T2. I'm going to pick The Terminator. Sets up
all right, I will allow it.
A great second viewing of that franchise.
All right, I got so many here to choose from that are pretty similar as far as what I like. It's my last pick. I'm sure I won't win this anyway because I never do.
I don't know. Back to the Future is a big bullet.
Yeah, but then they'll always go with somebody else. I had Prince, for God's sakes, on the Minnesota one, and I didn't win that.
Terminator.
Who won that?
Oh, shut up.
Terminator is a pretty big bullet too, Gifford.
So I'm going to go, I don't think any of these are going to win me the thing. So I'm going to pick another one that's a little bit of a kind of lost in the shuffle movie that, again, I'm going to stick to my theme here. I picked this movie because I met my wife and I's first date. So this is a movie we went to together. Again, didn't necessarily know a lot about it, but it stars Blake Lively and Harrison Ford, and it is called The Age of Adeline. And it is another, if you liked About Time, Gifford, you're going to like this one too. It is so good. And you love Blake Lively. I mean, who wouldn't want to watch her?
Yeah.
So it is a wonderful, wonderful movie. Really caught me by surprise. And I'm going to throw that in my last pick.
Excellent.
All right. Now I'm going to go with it, Gifford, and we'll see if it matches up with your movie because before the episode, before we started recording, we said, I have a cartoon, you have a cartoon movie, and they could be the same thing.
All right.
But it's an older cartoon. I used to love it. It's part of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, but it's the Peabody and Sherman section of it. And they made a Peabody and Sherman movie, and I thought it was a funny show. Funny cartoon. Smart. It's one of those that's like really smartly done, and you kind of have to know what they're talking about, but it's also kind of stupid too.
Smartly done and stupid. Perfect.
Sounds like The Naked Gun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're gonna bookend with Back to the Future. I'm gonna take Back to the Future Part 2.
2, huh? Not 3?
I don't like 3.
See, 3, yeah.
I'd probably pick 3.
I know you would. We had
like
this
the Old
discussion
West.
with Shirley.
I know.
Yeah. What else you got, Brad?
I got Idiocracy.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
I got the movie Click with Adam Sandler, one of his actually pretty good ones, I think. This is the whole movie isn't, but there's a very important scene at the end, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban with the time turner.
I have that one on my list.
The Groundhog Day set in the kind of the present with Andy Samberg is Palm Springs.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
13 going on 30 with Jennifer
Garner.
Garner.
Hello.
I have The Butterfly Effect, which I only think I saw once, but I know I liked it, so I put that down there. And another one that didn't quite live up to my hopes, but it was kind of funny, and it did have a lot of good nostalgia. Hot Tub Time Machine.
Good pull there.
John Cusack and Chevy Chase. That makes for a pretty good movie.
Yeah. I almost picked that as my last pick, but I've watched Back to the Future Part 2 way more, loved it more, so didn't go with Hot Tub.
I had
Any
a
of
couple
you guys?
that haven't been mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I had a few that you mentioned. The ones that you have not mentioned, I had. There's actually only two. Flight of the Navigator, which was a Disney movie that I watched when I was a kid. I would have to go back and watch it to really tell you the details about it, but I remember loving it as a kid, and so came across it on my list. And I have another Reese Witherspoon one, Brad. You're going to like this one. Fear.
What?
How is that?
Fear. You know, with the clock band.
Oh,
He moves the time
Oh
forward.
my God! Oh, that's really well done, Dave. Dave will like that.
That's
Strikes
amazing.
again.
I like that.
Pete, that might be the funniest thing you've ever actually done on this show. That was great.
Well, thank you. Thank
And
you.
hopefully somebody listening understands the joke because they listened to that episode, because it's actually a very funny joke, but you got to listen to the show.
It took me a while to get there. So I had mentioned Austin
I wanted
Powers.
to see how long it would take to take you guys. But
Sure.
Clock wrestle.
So the other two Austin Powers movies that we have time travel in there. The third one, I love Michael Caine as Austin's dad.
The third one is way better than the second one, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yep.
I also had Back to the Future 3, by the way, on my list. I
Oh.
didn't say that.
For sure. Another one I wrote down because of a great casting was, and it's not a great movie, but Men in Black 3, when they cast Josh Brolin as K, Tommy Lee Jones' younger version. That is a perfect casting, in my opinion. A movie that I could not figure out for the life of me, but tried to, and that is Tenet. Looper is a good one with Bruce Willis. Interstellar, another Christopher Nolan flick.
I can't handle those Christopher Nolan movies. Like those ones are too complicated for me to even try.
Okay.
I mean, I watched Inception, but I didn't get it, and
that one's tough to. Yeah, you got a couple viewings.
I liked Oppenheimer because that was more of a traditional
Sure.
story.
Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. That was a fun one. Avengers Endgame, of course. A lot of time travel in that one. And the cartoon that I had, Pete, came out, maybe in 2017. Meet the Robinsons, I thought was a really cute time travel.
I've never seen that, but I've heard that's a good movie.
Yeah, it is.
I think my kids liked that movie quite a bit, but I never watched it with them.
I watched it quite a few times with Paul, and yeah, it was a good one. Yeah, so a lot of great time travel to watch.
So
hey,
speaking
Gifford,
of
if you had a
great
time machine
things,
and could go back to
Oh wait, Pete, we're not there yet. Hold on.
I just want to throw out
Okay,
there might be a little Christmas surprise under your stocking in a couple days here. So keep your eyes open for the
That's
Pop
right.
Culture Yearbook.
Check us out on Thursday.
We're wrapping our gifts right now, and we're thinking of what we can give you.
Well, and the other thing too, the day after this airs, I will be broadcasting a boys' high school hockey game for our local radio station. So I'm expanding my media empire. We'll see how that goes. So if you're so interested, listen to K-Bun out of Bemidji.
K-Bun out of Bemidji
On Tuesday for my
with
debut.
Ryan Gifford.
That's right. See how that goes.
Okay, Pete.
The
take it
Bud.
The Bud.
Hey, Gifford, if you had a time machine and could go back to 1998, what band would you listen to first?
I would go back and I would listen to Preacher Row at the Turf Club. Did they ever play the
There
Turf
you
Club?
I don't know. I was never there for them, but they might have played there.
I think they may have. I don't know.
Played
but
the 400 bar.
I would go back and watch Preacher Row.
All right.
All right. Well, you don't have to go back in time. Here they are right now.
Bye.
See ya.
1, 2, 3. No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your son is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared, but there's nothing I can do.